Is it really possible to take the pellet out of a box robot and still drive the results you want? Well, you're about to find out in this special two-part episode of the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, recorded in front of a live audience in the Tanborg at World Dairy Expo and brought to you by DeLaval. This is the first part of our conversation where we sit down with two dairymen and their advisors to hear where this no-feed VMS concept came from, why they made the decision to move away from feed incentives, how they made that transition, and what they saw in the early stages. That and more right here today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This episode is brought to you by DeLaval. As a company built on innovation, DeLaval is committed to finding ways to help dairy farmers do more with less by providing world-leading milking equipment and solutions. Thank you to all of you who have already joined us this morning live here and in person at World Dairy Expo as we join this conversation with two dairy producers and their advisors who have adopted a concept that a few years ago many would not have even thought of, and that's the concept of using a VMS system without the concentrate. We're going to be digging into where that concept came from, the transition process for these producers of adopting the idea, implementing it into their VMS systems at home, as well as how that's impacted labor, time savings, and most importantly, performance, productivity, herd health, and profitability. And so to really kick us off this morning, I'm going to introduce you to our four panelists. I have here to my side Matt Strickland from Double Creek Dairy in California, Kelli Hutchings from Kelly's Ag Service in Colorado, Heeg from Heeg Dairy in Wisconsin, and his advisor, Jodi Erickson from Pure Production Ag, also from Wisconsin as well. And we're going to take a moment to get to know these dairy farmers and their systems at home. And we're going to start with you, Matt. So Matt, tell us a little bit about the history of your family's dairy operation and where you currently are when it comes to number of cows, the type of milking system you use, and a little bit about the family involvement there as well.
Yeah, I'm a fourth generation dairy farmer in California. My great grandfather immigrated from Holland and started his herd in Southern California in 1928. My grandfather was a large animal vet, and he decided to get into the dairy business in 1976, and he moved north to Central Valley, where we're from, in 1980. In 1994, my parents decided to go out and purchase a dairy in their herd of 650 Holsteins. And they started farming there in 1994, and that's the facility I'm currently on. I graduated from Fresno State in 2009, and in 2010, my parents wanted to get out of the business, so my grandfather and I partnered up on that herd, and we worked together for about 4 years, and then my wife and we bought the herd outright from him in 2014. Currently today, we milk 2,200 Holsteins, 1,700 through conventional double 22 parlor. Then we have 8 DeLaval VMS that we milk 500 cows on those, and we also have a double 10 hospital barn. We farm 475 acres, and we have 25 employees altogether. My wife and kids, they kind of help out around the farm when there's no school, and things like that. But overall, we have employees that run the day-to-day, and I manage them and manage the accounting systems and make most of the financial decisions.
Well, thank you, Matt. And in addition to those employees, you have your own employee team of 7 kids. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have 7 kids. The oldest is 18, a freshman at Montana State studying ag business, and it goes down to our youngest is 1. So.
And Matt, you touched on that you have 25 employees at the dairy there. And when you really look at that picture of what it's been like to manage employees and to deal with labor, especially in an area where you're at, California, there's some different regulations, there's some different state laws, but also, there's opportunity for you with adopting robotic milking and VMS system. Can you talk a little bit about what it's been like, your journey of managing people and the factors that led you to bring VMS milking into your setup?
Yeah, initially we didn't do it because we had a labor problem. We did it because we had really good labor. My my team at the time was really steady, but I realized that they were kind of herdsman style people and they could just as easily go get a herdsman job on another dairy. So we wanted to retain them. So our goal was to provide a higher end job, a higher paying job. And so one way we thought we could do that was by bringing in VMS. It's a little bit more technical, and that would provide a higher end job, and we could promote those guys. That worked, but I will say today the labor challenges have changed, and labor is truly a challenge. We've promoted those guys and they were all good, but now our bottom end seems to rotate quite a bit. And the VMS, they make that easier on us for sure, because we only have 2 or 3 guys that run in that barn, but it's labor overall in California is still a challenge.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit about your setup. Can you walk us through the layout and the cow flow of your VMS system?
Yeah, we're a guided flow system with a centralized robot room in the middle of the freestall barn. We do have sort pens or special need pens where we can sort cows that need to be treated. We also use those as training pens. The centralized robot room divides the barn into 4 pens, so we have 2 robots in each pen. Currently, right now, we're grouping by lactation. We have 1 pen that's all first lacs, a pen that's first and seconds. The next pen is all seconds, and the 4th pen is third plus. That really hasn't worked out how we planned. We thought it would kind of make us a little more efficient with labor, and it's been a little bit of the opposite. We felt it did better when the cows were co-mingled. It kept the robots busier. Older cows don't need to get up and eat as much. They eat larger meals. And so those robots sit empty a little bit more. So we're kind of thinking we need to get back to co-mingling to keep the cow flow moving through the barn. We also thought it would make it so we could kind of leave those older cows alone and that they would kind of go on their own. But those cows also have longer box times because they're giving more milk. So that actually made our fetch cow list more because we struggled getting them through the barn. So it didn't quite work out how we were hoping. So we're thinking about going back to co-mingling.
So that's a strategy that you're looking to continue to refine and hone in. And you're an example, too, of what many other dairy producers can relate to, and that's going from that transition of parlor milking to bringing cows into a robotic system. So what were some of the changes that you really saw in your cows as you brought them into VMS setup, as far as some of that welfare, that animal behavior, and of course efficiency?
Yeah, those cows are definitely a lot more friendly, a lot more calm. In a conventional side, whenever you go into a pen, you're usually moving cows, so the first thing they do is stand up and move. The robot barn, we don't do that. We're target fetching, and so those cows kind of wait for you. They're not standing up as soon as you walk in a pen. Some are annoyingly friendly. They won't move because they're so friendly, or they come and lick all over you, stuff like that. But it's nice to see cows that are you can also rub all over them too. The biggest kind of change that we saw as far as like cow comfort and stuff is what we've noticed in California. We have really hot summers, and our conventional herd will lose body condition, and our robot herds maintain their body condition through the summer a lot better.
So that was pretty profound for you to observe that.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to see when you get into the dog days of August, and your conventional cows are just moving a little bit slower and they look a little skinnier, and you go over to the robot barn and they're perky and they're not losing weight. Some of that is because it's a brand new barn, and our cow cooling and everything in there is top notch and was designed real well. So some of that's just from being a newer facility, but I also think some of it is from those cows not getting up and walking to the parlor 3 times a day.
And Matt, you mentioned that you have a great team of employees that were ready to be really challenged and elevated in their skill set. And that was one of the reasons that prompted you to bring VMS into your milking setup. But can you tell us a little bit about what your role has been in the robot barn and their roles as well? How do you spend your days? And how do some of those key guys that are in the barn spend theirs?
When we first started up, obviously it was new to everybody. And so for the first year, I ran the barn. I kind of did everything. I wanted to learn as much as I could, so that way I could instruct my guys on how to do it and how to do it the way that I thought best. But after about a year, I had to get back to my job running the whole facility. So I kind of started passing that off to them and training them the way that we wanted to do. So currently we have two guys that really work in there. One's a herdsman and the other would be like his assistant or his helper. Our herdsman comes in at 5 a.m. He works 5 to 5. He's 4 days on, 2 days off. And he's in charge of maintenance and things like that on the robots, taking care of them, keeping them running, and then also managing the cows and the fetch lists and things like that. His helper, he comes in before him at 3 a.m. We saw that there was kind of a dead time between, I'd say, 2 and 6 a.m. where cows weren't going. So what we did is we started raking beds at that time, because that's a way to get cows up and moving and stirred up to go through the robot. So it's not a targeted fetch, but it works as a fetch, and it accomplishes the goal of keeping the beds clean. So he comes in at that time and does that, and then he kind of helps out a little bit with the main herdsman of the robot dairy, but then he'll also bounce over the conventional dairy and help over there. Because we have both dairies on the same site, we have a lot of guys that go both ways. Our night guy, for instance, his main job is watching the maternity and milking the hospital, but if he has time, he goes over and does a fetch at night, and then also trains fresh cows. So we have the main herdsman that he's strictly the robots, but the other guys kind of bounce back and forth. And as far as what I do, I mainly manage the data. I try to interpret what it's telling me, what we should implement or not implement, or things like that. And then I kind of pass that down to those guys to put into action.
Thank you for telling us a little bit about your setup there at Double Creek Dairy in California, Matt. And now I want to take a moment to introduce one of your key advisors, a woman who has been by your side through many of these conversations about making sure we are maximizing the opportunity in these VMS systems, and the generator of a novel concept that we're talking about today, and that is Miss Kelli Hutchings from Colorado. And now you might notice that on the screen, if you're looking at this picture of Kelli, that those aren't dairy cows in that picture. So Kelli, I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself, explain your background and why those black cows are in that picture, but also the value that you bring to the table in helping producers like Matt and having conversations with Jay and Jodi as well, and being able to bring forward a concept that has been new to the industry in the last few years. Miss Kelli, take it away.
Thank you. I know I should have dairy cows up there because I am Kelli, the dairy lady, but I just happened to marry a rancher in Wyoming. So I wear my dairy hat and my beef hat at the same time. I just celebrated my 34th year in the Colorado dairy industry, and I work closely with our consulting nutritionists that come to Colorado to work on our herds, because they only come every 3 to 4 weeks. I'm on the farms every week, walking cows, stapling forages, managing harvests, play trainings, the list goes on. So I'm the liaison there now Friday. I just happened to spend the weekends and calving season up in Wyoming with some beef cattle on the side.
And Kelli, talk a little bit about the relationship with Matt and being an advisor to his dairy in California.
So again, the nutrition relationship came into play here. His nutritionist, I worked with him on 5 different herds in Colorado. And he came to me and he said, Kelli, I have a client in California that's putting in robots. Would you help us? And I don't know why Mike came to me, other than I was involved with the Long Skeet project, where we're milking 4,000 cows.
Yes, and you spent lots of time observing those cows, their behaviors, and now with a few years of doing so under your belt, you're able to really speak to those improvements and changes that you've seen. And now we're going to go from California and Colorado to Wisconsin with Jay Heeg. Jay, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Jay Heeg from Heeg Brothers Dairy in Colby. So I grew up on a 120 cow stanchion barn in Unity. I went to college at University of Wisconsin River Falls for broad area agriculture, and then shortly after that, after college, I had some internships with milk and equipment companies. Those Babson Brothers, the parent company of Surge Milk and Equipment. So I did internships with them. I ended up getting hired full time. I worked with them for 2.5 years. So the milk and equipment is really something I was pretty passionate about then, learned a lot about. But then we had conversations at home about our home farm, and my brother had another farm 10 miles away about joining forces and working together. So that's what happened in 1999. We combined the two farms, built a freestall barn and a parlor, a double 12 at that time, parallel, and combined the herds and started with 625 cows. So throughout the years, made some growths to different buildings, added on parlor, and then we were up to 1,200 cows, and decided to go the route with the robots in 2023. We started moving around in May. Currently, we milk 480 cows with 8 robots in the robot barn, and we still milk in our conventional parlor. We still milk 1,050 in the conventional parlor. So I farm with my 2 brothers, Mark and Gary. They each have a son also that's involved. Nate and Corey are involved in the farm also. And our dad, who is 92, he was just here yesterday, and this last weekend he was still hauling milk. He's more of a part-time now. We got him down to only 12 hours a day. He's only part-time. But still at the farm. So then with my dad and my brothers and my nephews, I mean, there's 3 generations working together at the farm. So pretty interesting. And we farm 3,400 acres. We do most all the field work ourselves. We hire spraying out and hauling manure. Otherwise, we raise all of our own young stock. So we also have 1,400 heifers that we raise from birth on, and we employ 25 employees.
And Jay, can you tell us a little bit about that original decision and motivation a few years back to bring VMS into your dairy?
So, like I said, we toured a lot of facilities. And to be honest, 10 years ago, when I first seen box robots, I'm like, there's no way it's going to work for us. No way. And so we started touring places and seeing different things. And it's like, wow, people are doing this and they're doing that. And you see just so many different things, and people get such, different ideas. But we really started seeing like the cows, how the cows were living in those buildings. That was the biggest draw to why we ended up going that route, was the cows just living. I use the same line. I didn't realize that they live in their best life. They're just out there living their day, just doing what they want on their own schedule. That was the biggest draw to us of going robotic. Was the cows' life and how they were living out there, and we just thought that in the future, labor's a challenge all the time. So that's how we decided to go that route.
And so, as you moved in that direction, tell us a little bit about the setup of your barn. You have a little bit different type of design with placement of the robots.
So we have 4 robots per pen. It's toll booth style. So we have a commitment pen. They go through, and then they all exit out through a sort gate. And then at the end, so the robots are at the end of the pen. But then on the other side of the robots is the sort pen. So we do all of our work. They're sorted off, and then we do all of the work in the sort pens, as much as possible. We try to stay out of the pen. The barn is laid out that it can be added onto 2 more times. So currently now it's just like a mono slope. So we're not even to the peak yet. So we could flip and do the same thing 2 more times. So the building is laid out that we could end up with 24 robots. And in our commitment pen, one thing that they did different, this was the Fox Cities idea, they have a lane off on the side, and that's a training lane. So like when we train new ones, if they don't want to go in good, we just put them down it's just like a return lane, and it goes right to one robot. And it's got a bump gate that moves, and then we leave that open all the time, that they can go into that training lane. So let's say if there's a timid cow that's in a commitment pen, or there's somebody there they don't like because they know everybody that they live with. There's somebody they don't like, they might just go down that lane and just go like a free pass to the one robot. And it's funny because there's somebody lined up there all the time. And if it's too long, I've watched them already just back out and go over here and go to another one. So, I mean, cows are pretty amazing. They really figure it out.
And Jay, we'll talk more about that layout and how that's an asset to training these cows when we get into that part of the conversation later. But really from someone who has that conventional dairy parlor on site and now has the robots, and you kind of alluded to the fact that you see more of that style of milking in your future. But what have you really noticed? What stuck out to you about the differences of the cow herself in the robot barn?
Well, like I said, they're just living their best life, and it's just so calm and quiet. And not that it is in the parlor, but in the parlor, they just all got to move in groups, and everything's timed around the parlor. So your world evolves around the parlor. Wake up in the morning and your world revolves around the parlor. Milking starts at 5 a.m. And then the robot barn is just so different. It's just, you can make up your own schedule. I have to remind my herdsmen about the scheduling often. I'm like, well, we can use our own is in the we can use him anytime we want. He's not has to be there at a certain things. For wash only is the certain times when things happen. But the flexibility of it is really what I've noticed with the robot barn versus the conventional. Just flexible of your time and schedule.
Flexibility is so key. And even as Matt, when you were talking about how the things work at your place, it's flexibility of the employees too, to be able to be cross-trained and an asset to different areas of the operation, not just tied down to one. And same thing for you, Jay, as well. How does that work with your team, the folks that are in the barn? What are their key duties, and what are yours now with this milking style?
So with employees, we have we run just one person in there. It's a 12-hour shift basically from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So they take care of the washes. And to be honest, they do a lot of cleaning. He does a lot of cleaning things down, scraping things down, keeping things clean. That's a big role. So then he'll have the herdsman will come over, like when it's a vaccination day. The herdsman comes over and all the cows are sorted out, and he'll help them out vaccinating cows in the sort pen. So he has them kind of lined up. Or same with herd health day. The herdsman comes with the veterinarian from the parlor over. The guy in the robot barn's got them already all lined up. So the vet comes in and just goes through. But then there's days when, if there's not one of them activities going on, we have taken the guy from the robot barn, and we've gone by with just 3 hours a day of labor. Because I wanted to try that. How low can we go? What do we need over here? But like I said, a lot of time is spent cleaning, and the cows really, really do better on their own. They don't need somebody in there. They'll actually prefer to be, once they're trained, they prefer to be just doing it themselves. So we've gotten as low as 3 hours of labor a day that can run the barn. The cleaning don't get done. So like my main guy, he was off for a week. So when he came back, he's like, oh, I got to do change the tubes and change the hoses, and he had to kind of catch up on a few things. So there wasn't a problem, but we were just able to get by with 3 hours of labor a day with 480 cows. So it's just really a lot of flexibility. So at our parlor, that still runs about this, does the same. The robots is like its own thing over there. And for myself, so I make the lists and keep track of everything that's going on in both. But the robot barn is just so calm and quiet. I love being in there because it's just cows. And then the parlor, it's managing people. And that was one of the things, one of our determining factors with going robotics is the managing people aspect of it. That's, as everybody knows, that's always a challenge. And there's it's just always going to be that way. So I really enjoy being in a robotic barn. I almost got to make myself go over to the parlor because that's where my troubles are.
So if someone shows up at your place and they can't find you, they should look in the robot barn.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
And Jay, as we talk about the role that you have in that barn and also your family members, for those of us that are here in this audience today, there's a young lady up on that screen. Do you want to tell us a little bit about her?
It's my daughter Jasmine. So she's out in the barns here. she shows, we have a few animals here that we show, but she's very passionate about animals. So that is a big factor, I feel like, in the transitioning forward. The managing a robot barn is just so much different than like you're managing people in the parlor. So the robot barn is just so much more apt for cows and people that, are tuned into cows. So, and I feel that's going to be easier to, to have those kind of folks do that. Like she would be able to handle that on a bigger scale even, because it's just not like managing people.
Well, thank you for giving us an overview of your operation, Jay. And now we'll move on to one of your key advisors to your side here, and that's Miss Jodi Erickson with Pure Production Egg. Jodi, take a moment and introduce yourself. Tell us a little about who you are, what you do, and your advisory role to Jay and his dairy.
Sure, good morning. So much kind of like Jay, I also grew up on a dairy farm, a Kai-style farm in Central Wisconsin. We had a closed Holstein herd, pursued degrees in egg business and dairy science. I then bred cows for a couple of years and then transitioned into the nutrition role with a mill in Central Wisconsin. And I practiced nutrition there, actually where I initially met Jay, then transitioned into the independent side of things. Outside of the dairy consulting, my husband and my in-laws also farm.
Similar to Kelli here, you are living and breathing farming at work and at home. And talk a little bit too about how your services and your advisory really plays in on a day-to-day basis for Heeg Dairy.
I think just the concept of truly understanding the struggle that a dairy farmer lives day in and day out. There's just a lot of challenges I think that I observe outside of the nutrition side of things. So that maybe helps bring some practicality to things.
Yes, and you work with a fair amount of robot herds as well in your area.
Yep, correct. So I primarily worked through central Wisconsin to east central Minnesota, working with about half a dozen robotic dairy farms, and that was initially how I moved up, I guess, in the advisory position with Jay. So I'm out at the farm once a month, but I do a lot of snooping behind the scenes, logging in through TeamViewer, looking at data, trying to push some information back to Jim, and even just drawing conclusions about changes that we've made, like what the cows are telling us, and trying to just keep track of some of those intentional decisions or unintentional, like how they impact production, cow traffic, etc.
Wonderful. Well, thank you each for taking the moment to introduce yourselves so we can get to know you a little bit better, your operations, and also for those of you that are in the audience today, thank you for going ahead and sending several questions into our queue. Please continue to do so. Again, there's this card with a QR code on your table. And please know that we will be addressing some of these questions in our conversation. And we will also be interjecting those coming from the audience as we get to some of our key topics today. So keep on sending those questions in and know that we will be addressing them as we move from our introduction phase of this session today to really what you're all here to learn about and to hear about and to gain a bigger and deeper understanding of, and that's the no-feed system. And there's a story behind this. It's kind of an entertaining one, actually. And so, Kelli, I got to turn it over to you because no one can tell it better than Kelli.
Apparently, everybody gets a big kick out of this story, but it came from a 3,000-acre pasture. I'm a rancher's wife on the side. So we have to supplement our cows in Wyoming. And I drive out in the feed truck in the morning. I call it the crack wagon. And I park in the middle of the pasture. And I was sitting there and I was watching the girls come out of the buff rush and out of the creek bottom. And I saw 5 or 6 girls off in the distance. So I grabbed the binoculars. And as I was looking at those 5 girls, meanwhile, our girls were all gathered around the crack wagon waiting for me to dispense their addiction, I noticed those were not our cows. They were the neighbor's cows. Those girls did not know what that feed truck meant. I can lead our girls like the Pied Piper over that 22,000-acre ranch, and they may not miss a beat because we have taught them to follow the feed truck. So as soon as I got back to the ranch house, I called Matt, and I said, what if? What if we never taught the girls they were going to get a treat in the robot? And we decided if it failed, all we had to do was turn the pellets back on. If it worked, we could keep going. So we started with first calf heifers, girls that didn't know what they didn't know, and we just didn't turn the feed on for them. They didn't miss a beat.
So you brought that concept, like you said, straight from the pasture now into these VMS barns. And the dynamic here is that, Matt, you were already in a setup where you were feeding pellet through the robot. Jay, you were a fresh new startup and coming into it from the angle of having never done it at all. So two different dynamics here, and we'll get more into that. But Matt, I want you to revisit some of those initial conversations that you and Kelli had that sparked that idea that was already percolating in your mind and really prompted you to just go for it, to just try it out. What was that phase like?
Yeah, again, my grandpa's the one that kind of, before we even had our robots built, I was kind of explaining to him, oh, this is how it works, and they get pellet in the barn, and he goes, well, that's funny. We ripped all that stuff out of our parlors. Like, you're going back 30, 40 years. And that I guess always stuck in my mind. And once we did start milking, you kind of go through some growing pains, right? Getting everything started, the robots and all the systems. Well, one of those systems is the grain system. And, when that breaks a few times, you're kind of going, man, this is really a pain. And the grain system's up on the roof. It's out of sight, out of mind. So you're not really good at maintaining it. But then when it breaks, you know about it because the cows stop going because they're not getting that treat. And it was kind of like after a few times of it breaking, it's like, man, this is a pain. Like if we could just get rid of this, life would be a lot easier. And that's kind of when Kelli approached and had that idea, and we collaborated on it. The other thing that was kind of a topic that was up in our area with robotic dairies was guys were saying, well, our butter fats are lower, our production's lower. The robots can't keep up with a parlor. And what me and Kelli noticed was with good training, we were getting our cows to the bunk more, and we weren't seeing the amount of depressed butter fat and depressed production that other dairies were. We were still seeing some, but kind of the explanation for that was we wanted to be labor efficient not only in our milk barn, but also in our feed area. So we wanted to be able to feed both herds off the same feed truck load. And the only way to do that is have the same ration. So our pellet was not a contributing factor in our ration. It was a flavor. It was salty. I tasted it. It's pretty good. I thought, I could sit at a ball game and pop these things all day. But that being said, I get the bill for it, and I'm kind of like, this is expensive flavor. It's not giving us any milk. It's not giving us any components. It's all it is flavor. So again, if we could eliminate this, it might be a little bit more profitable. And that's kind of where the ideas originated in my head, and then collaborating with Kelli, we thought that, there's a way we could get this done.
Yeah, so there was an idea that came up. You saw the potential benefits of how this made sense from, as you talked about, that efficiency standpoint. Feed efficiency, really it's streamlining the labor required for feed efficiency, the steps, the equipment, all of those things. But there's still, in your mind, had to be a few risk factors that you were considering. What was the other side? What was the devil's advocate in you that said, well, here's maybe why it wouldn't work?
I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of risk because we kind of, again, like Kelli said, if we started to see things slide, we would just turn it back on. And so, give it a few weeks, maybe give it a month, and if we see production go down or we see our fetch list balloon out of control or whatever, then all right, turn it back on, no harm, no foul. And really it was on those cows that were just coming in as fresh heifers. Those are the only ones that weren't getting pellets. So we didn't think that like, oh man, this herd's gonna crater, because it was a small portion of the herd that we were starting it with. We definitely did know that if you took pellets away from cows that were already getting them, those cows wouldn't come, right? We saw that when the grain system would break down. So, again, on that side, it was like, well, when the grain system breaks down, I got to fetch them all anyway. So we didn't see much of a negative that told us don't try this.
Sure, it was worth giving it a shot.
Yeah.
And so this was going on at your place. You and Kelli were having these conversations. Kelli bumps into Jay, and you were just at that point of, as we said, starting up your VMS barn. And so what was it to you? What were the goals that you had in mind that sealed the deal that this was worth giving it a shot, that it was worth giving it a try, Jay?
Well, we were interested in the DeLaval and the guided flow because of the lower amount of pellets. That was our main thing when we started looking at robots, is we wanted to feed as little as possible. That was one of our goals. We have a good forage base. We raise our own forage. We have our own harvester. We do our own chopping. So we have the forage. We don't like to buy feed if we don't have to. I mean, that's the biggest expense on the farm. So the less we can buy, the better. So that was how it really started out, is, okay, we wanted to go guided flow because we can feed less. That was how it started. We continued on with the whole process. I mean, we put in the auger system and we had it all purchased, and the bins and all that was in place. But then when the time to get closer, it's like, well, they really don't know. I mean, talk to anybody that starts a new cow, and then they go in the robot the first time, the pellets are there and they don't even know they're there. They don't know it. They're just as all new to them. So they don't even really eat them because they don't know that they're there. Well, let's just do it without turning it on. And then we got on a conference call with our nutrition team. We've talked about it with our nutrition team, and they were all in favor of less is better too. I mean, just from the standpoint of feed costs and the animal part of it. So we got on a conference call with Kelli, kind of talked through it and what would it look like, and decided, let's just do that. Let's do this. Let's just try it. We can always turn it on. We have everything in place. We're not going to put anything in there. I mean, I talked to the feed mill beforehand. I said, well, you got it on hand if we need. We're going to just go without and see what happens. And it's interesting because I think it was day 2 or 3. We were going, and I'm like, well, how many other startups did you do without any pellets? And she's like, well, you're the first one. Oh, I did not realize that, really. Okay. But, and I say this often, I don't know what it's like to have pellets. People with pellets want to know what it's like without pellets. I wonder what it's like with pellets sometimes. So as we're doing it, it's like, I don't know. We don't know what it's going to be like. But I mean, we just gave them time, and the cows just adapted. They didn't mind at all, because it's just like the first milking. They never knew what the pellet was in there anyway.
And Jay, as you've alluded to here, there were some important conversations that you needed to have with Jodi from the nutrition side, and that's going to play off of one of the questions in our queue here as well, that is really directed towards the feed and nutrition consultants and how that reaction was to a no-feed system. And so the question in the queue says, how do feed and nutrition consultants feel about no-feed systems if they're losing on the pellets push for the robots? But I think there's probably a lot more concerns that were running through your mind, Jodi. Can you just address what was coming up for you as you and Jay started to address this topic, and what your concerns were, but also what you saw as the potential opportunities too?
So honestly, when it first got brought up, it was very much like a shut the door and high five. Jim and I were really excited. Pellets bring in another area of management. So it was kind of like, well, right off the bat, that's just one less thing that we need to add to the management task. The other thing, to echo what Jay said, Jay's farm does an outstanding job at growing quality forages, and that's what we want to feed. We want to feed those quality forages to cows to push high intakes, high return, high feed efficiency, and they're doing that. So essentially, to bring pellets into a farm that doesn't necessarily need to offset forage, it's an added expense. I mean, it's very hard to justify. Yes, we're replacing potentially homegrown forage, and there is a price to growing that, but this was added feed expenses. And then also, it's another area of uncertainty on farms. When it feels like robot farms are struggling, it always goes back to, well, are the feed tables right? Well, should we change the feed tables? So we were actually really, really happy. But it's like, okay, has anybody done this before successfully? And successfully is kind of the key word. I believe today that no matter what system Jay would have put in, whether it was a different flavor of robots or crows, this farm was gonna make it work. So if there is anybody who has done this, they can too. Well, then along comes Kelli. And she was really kind of just like the echo chamber that we needed, or that positive affirmation, like, hey, this can work if you as a nutrition team can do A, B, and C.
And I'm going to direct a couple questions to our advisors up here, to Kelli and Jodi. And first, Kelli, just revisiting, you mentioned about Long's Peak and Jay and his visit there. So they do feed pellet at Long's Peak, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so thank you for clarifying that. But one of the questions in the queue here that I want to pose to the two of you, it says giving cows pellets in the robot is a way of controlling the amount of energy you're feeding each cow, depending on the state of lactation and milk yield. How do you meet each cow's needs with feeding everyone the same amount?
This is probably one of the number one questions I get from naysayers or curious individuals. I have a simple answer: milk permissions. We're fully guided or modified guided systems where we have a selection gate. So again, we're working with the animal's natural instinct to flow through our barn, seeking out feed and water. Feed being the TMR, a highly digestible, nutrient-dense, total mixed ration that we feed our cows in our parlors. I mean, it was invented in the 60s for a reason, right? To minimize the variability in the ruminant animal's digestion, because what drives milk production? Dry matter intake, dry matter intake, dry matter intake. Okay? All we're doing is we're guiding her through the system, and when she comes to this pre-selection gate, based on her stage of lactation, we say, yes, you can go to the TMR. No, you have to make a pit stop here and feed milk. So to manage our girls later in lactation, it's easy peasy. We don't have to mess with complicated feed tables. We don't have to mess with manipulating amounts of pellets, cleaning out systems. We simply make a decision for her at the gate. Anything?
Jodi, more to add? Or Jay?
I got something, because we get asked that once in a while. I mean, so everything, to sum it up, what Kelli said, everything's in the bunk, what they eat. Everything is in there. Just no different than like our pre-fresh. Now that is the most, that's where you're setting it up for your whole lactation, is in your pre-fresh. So we're not feeding them a little bit of this or that. We feed them everything they get is in the bunk right in front of them. So that, just like in our conventional parlor, we have cows that give 200 pounds in a conventional parlor, just like there's 2 cows in the robots that give 200 pounds because they're fed. Everything's in the bunk, just a matter of how much they eat.
So one thing that we did notice as time went on, both his robot barn and his Carler barn, we're getting the exact same ration, exact same TMR. And as we got started on this, one thing we realized is that the robot cows were actually putting on their body heat addition than the other barn. And as Jim and I were both at the farm on separate occasions, we kept telling each other, these cows are eating fat, these cows are eating fat. So I would actually argue, so we do have a very slightly different ration now. But I think maybe because this is a brand new barn, there's lots of perks to that as well. I mean, when we looked at Jay's farm this summer in Wisconsin, it was extremely warm. You know, we were in that barn and it's 5 to 10 mile an hour airflow all the time. The cows are comfortable. These cows are doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that, Jodi. And another question really related to nutrition. This one's targeted for you, Jay, from our queue here. But curiosity over what % of forage is your diet? And I think it might be worth exploring on both ends of how you're incorporating that, forage diet based on your feed availability, and then what needs to be supplemented around that.
You want to go with that?
Yep. So Jay's diet is over 60% forage. Actually, right now it's actually 62. But that was something that even Jim and I still look at as we compare his ration to some of my other robotic producers. Even if we'd be positioning some of that dry corn into the pellet, it would be really hard to get a TMR that's over 50 to 55% forage, even if we were trying to, feed 5 pounds per cow through the robot. So it definitely, the thoughts that we had, I think we have realized, and it's been a good decision.
And for you, Matt, what's that mix of forage in the ration, and what does your ration look like? It might be a little bit different than Jay's from Wisconsin to California.
Yeah, I don't have the benefit of having my nutritionist sit here today to answer that question. I've never been very good at memorizing what my rations are. I put them in the computer and they are what they are. But yeah, we're definitely not that high of a forage-based ration. We don't have the land base that sounds like Heeg's do. But we have a lot of byproducts in California, almond hulls, things like that, that we put in. But yeah, we still feel like we get everything at the bunk. We don't need the excess coming from a pellet. It's all in the bunk, and from what we saw, we're doing this. It's worked, and the cows are getting what they need. To echo what Jodi said, you get your cows pregnant on time, you don't run into fat cows, and we have a decent to good repro program. We get our cows pregnant. We don't have to worry about it.
You just heard from Jay Heeg, Jodi Erickson, Matt Strickland, and Kelli Hutchings in part 1 of this conversation from World Dairy Expo. In part 2, we'll dive into the data, the milk flow, cow behavior, labor savings, and the results that are changing how these dairies define their success. Don't forget to follow, rate, and share this episode of the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and as always, keep on growing, keep on learning, and upleveling your dairy. This episode is brought to you by DeLaval. As a company built on innovation, DeLaval is committed to finding ways to help dairy farmers do more with less by providing world-leading milking equipment and solutions.